Hey, howdy. Well, welcome to the next one. So, let me just say right off the bat, don't let the name on this one fool you. This is actually a very good one. And it's kind of unfortunate that it's been forgotten over time. It is also a Bible game, but
Get ready.
it's dignified at the very least. I'm immediately going to turn down the music and sound effects because I know they're going to be too loud. So, gimmick with this one is fairly simple. You see two of the same type, you match them. Not really much more to it than that. Interesting thing as well is that unlike the Flash version, if you run out of moves, it doesn't instantly end your run, which I'm a big fan of. In fact, the game is actually quite generous when it comes to that. But it's really funny. The first thing that I thought of as soon as I realized that I could play this game was just the, what am I thinking of? Playing it with AI. Because I actually just finished taking a class on AI. I guess because summer is here, I get to say that. And it was fascinating, and it taught me quite a few things. So I guess today the main thing I'm going to talk about is that class, what I learned from it, how I really liked it. First off, artificial intelligence and neural networks are not the same thing. I already said this before. Oh wait, I should explain this. This is basically collapse or big money. It's the thing where tiles come in from the bottom, you have to click them, but you can only click them if they're in groups of 3 or more. Past a certain point, I think I'm just gonna let these immediately rise to the top because I like the core gameplay a lot more, but this is like basically fun. But either way, I already made this point a while ago, but I just want to reiterate. If anyone ever tells you that an AI and a neural network are the same thing and they use the two terms interchangeably, that person is not to be trusted.
Get ready.
Well, you might be wondering then, what is an AI? Well, it's a very difficult question because it needs to be an answer that categorizes man-made things that use knowledge without also qualifying people and simple machines. Like, for example, if the definition was just something that uses knowledge to make decisions, well, first off, what are knowledge? What are decisions?
Bubble up. Get ready.
And second off, where do you draw the line between something using knowledge to make decisions because it's programmed to versus doing it of its own volition? And for that matter, what does it mean to do something of your own volition? That gets into a weird philosophical thing of like theory of mind. What does it mean to be human? What does it mean to have air quotes free will? Does free will even exist? I'm going on a wild tangent, but you get what I mean. I hope. The trouble is that it's not a question you can answer easily.
Bubble up. Get ready.
Because if I were to say just that a AI is something that uses information to make decisions in a closed environment, well then, I could have described a calculator, because that's what a calculator does. A calculator takes information provided by the user and uses it to make decisions. Now, those decisions are not really what you would think of as decisions, but when you think about the definition of what a decision is, in the context of a computer, it's just you have this input, you do some calculations, and you get some output. But I've kind of been going off on semantics, so I may as well explain what I believe AI is. AI, in a word, it's all about consolidation of information. You have some breadth of information and some base of knowledge. You take that information, you classify it, you discriminate it, you do whatever you want to do with it, and then the end result is you make decisions. You either output something or you make changes to that data.
Get ready.
And from there, we can start to think of some very interesting applications and some other things that, like, you wouldn't immediately think of as artificial intelligence, but it really is. Also, that's what happens when you run out of moves. There we go. Am I blind? Yep, I'm blind. Okay. One form of AI that you wouldn't think of is a search engine. And I mean, it makes sense. Because, like I said, the definition of an AI is something that takes in information and uses it to make decisions in a closed environment. Well, the closed environment is just whatever knowledge Google or Bing or Opera or whatever the hell else search engine has fed into it. The knowledge, of course, is all of the data that's present within the walls of Google headquarters or Bing Enterprises. And the decisions is just what links it decides to show you. Now, that's already interesting, but there's a bit of an issue when it comes to that knowledge.
Level up. Get ready.
That suppose we wanted to use that knowledge to do something. Like suppose we have some blocks on a table. Let's just say there are 3 blocks on a table. That much we know. We know that one of the blocks is above the table, one of the blocks is above one of the other blocks, and a third block is above one of the blocks. Well, if you wanted to then ask the computer which block is on the bottom, or which block is on the bottom or on the top or just in the center, we can logically think of it and find that answer. There's one block on the top because nothing's above it. There's one block on the bottom because it's pressing against the table. But how do you make that distinction with a machine? Machines can't just snap a finger, press a finger into their temple, and then figure out a solution. You need to have some mechanism to let them make that distinction for themselves. And that is very difficult to accomplish. And weirdly enough, the solution comes from logical proofs, which I personally hate, but they're very, very helpful. Because there's this logical mechanism called modus ponens. It's probably the most famous logical proof, and it's the only one that are one of the few that you consciously use on a regular basis. Because a lot of them are just like, oh, that makes sense. It's like some logical continuation. Modens Potens is especially that.
Get ready.
Oh, dang it. Every time with the Discord. It simply reads that if you have two statements that A implies B, and you have the statement A, then you can infer that B. Actually, let me rephrase that in a way that makes a bit more sense. Suppose that you know that some statements are true. You know that if A is true, then B is true, and you also know that A is true. Well, from those 2 points, you can also infer that B is true.
Get ready.
Yeah, you can also infer that A is true. I bungled that. But you get what I mean. I hope. I hope I'm not doing a terrible job at explaining this. We have 2 statements. You have A implies B, and you have A, so you know B. And it also... The trouble is that it does not go the other way around. If you have A implies B, and you know B, that doesn't mean that you know A. Because there's this famous law of statistics that correlation does not imply causation. Basically, just because there are 2 things that are true, it doesn't necessarily mean that they are true because of each other. Like, for example, suppose that there is a statistic that... I'm trying to think of a good one. You're more likely to get into a car crash if you smoke. Let's go with that. It's like fairly standard. While I'm certainly of the belief that smoking is bad for you, I don't necessarily believe that you smoking causes an increase in your chance of getting in a car accident. But there are some auxiliary factors that haven't been considered. Like, for instance, people who smoke are more likely to be...
Get ready.
Let's see. How would I frame this so that it works? People who smoke are more likely to be 9 to 5 working shifts. And people who are 9 to 5 working shifts are much more likely to get in car accidents because they commute. Or they are much more likely to commute, I should say. And therein lies the issue. There needs to be... You need to know all the intermediary factors in order to make a valid connection like that. Thing is, the AI can't do that. So let's take a break from the AI for a bit. We'll come back to... Let's take a break from the knowledge-based ones. We'll come back to that. Instead, let's talk about something that, at a passing glance, doesn't even really feel like AI, and that's searching. That suppose you have some list of books, and you want to go through those books and find a word, let's say. Now, naturally, it is really hard to look through even 20 books to find a word.
Get ready.
Much less search through hundreds of books like an AI could be instructed to do. And there are different methods that you can use to search, but not all of them are very good. It's like sorting algorithms, where you look at some of them and you just think, damn, this just sucks. Because something that comes to mind is,
Get ready.
something called depth first search. Basically, you have some starting point. From that starting point, you get all of the possible next things, and then you keep going like that until you find your answer. Now, the trouble with that should seem fairly obvious, and if you think about some situations where you would want to apply that suppose you have a room, suppose you have a maze, and you want to find your way out of it. Well, given a starting point, there are 100 possible paths you can
Get
take.
ready.
And from those 100 possible paths, there are 100 more possible paths in each of those directions that you could take. That's already a lot. And that's not even considering things like you eventually need to get an answer before you keel over. So there are mechanisms to improve those search algorithms.
Get ready.
The most well-known of those, and the one that's used a lot, is called A*. Now this is where we start to break into the things that programming YouTubers like to throw around a lot. And I'll admit, they're really, really helpful, but they're not ever explained very well is my issue. Because, I'll be frank, there is a distinct lack of knowledge of in the general public when it comes to AI, and it leads to people making brash generalizations and basically doing and thinking stupid things because some media outlet told them this thing, or some movie told them this thing about how AI works. It's not as bad as it used to be, because we're no longer a generation that grew up watching Terminator, so we're past that barrier at least. AI are no longer automatically out to kill us. But there's still a lot of hurdles of just misinformation about how AI works. And as much as I want to say that tech YouTube helps, it only helps sometimes, because a lot of the time, AI is painted as this magical, just this miracle cure. That you just plug it into any problem, and if you just put enough work into it, it can solve anything. It can do anything. And while that's true sometimes, there's never a face to it. Uh-oh, that's really bad. Ah, I beefed. Okay.
Game over.
GZC. That score is me, by the way. I was playing this game for a really long time a few days ago. Probably for like an hour. But let me knock it down to easy so I can keep talking. Because at this point I am just podcasting.
Get ready.
The issue with a lot of programming channels on YouTube is that it's difficult to go into detail about a lot of these things because you can't expect your audience to know. The alternative, though, is to just not tell them and to use a bunch of vague analogies and hope that that's good enough. I'm not blaming any specific programming YouTubers, of course, because it's a problem across the entire medium.
Level up. Get ready.
But the best way to learn about AI and algorithms is through a programming YouTube channel. And unfortunately, those can get very dense, and the average person is not going to sit through one of those videos if they're just trying to, like, watch an AI play Tetris or something like that. So I'm in a bit of a unique situation where I'm not necessarily an AI, or I'm not at all an AI channel. I could be an AI channel. I have some ideas for things that I might want to do in the future that could be really cool and could help to bridge the gap a little bit. But I'm not in that position quite yet. Maybe later, though. Beautiful.
Level up. Get
But
ready.
what was I talking? I was talking about A-star, right? So how A-star works is instead of running through literally every possible outcome, you start at some point, you get all of the next points, and then you assign each of those points a number. You sort that list, find the highest number, and then try again. And you keep doing that until either you run out of things to do, or until you reach your goal. Now, that's all fine and dandy, but there's a really big question associated with it, which is, what the heck is that number? Well, that number is different for every situation. It's referred to as a heuristic. And that heuristic can be wildly different based on whatever you're doing.
Level up. Get ready.
And while in theory, an A-star algorithm will always work even if it has a bad heuristic, it will take significantly longer if it has a bad heuristic. Sometimes to the point of not working at all, because, for example, a complex case of like a game of Tetris. You want to find the best possible set of moves for a given board state in Tetris. You know the current piece, you know the next piece.
Level
Go,
up.
basically.
Get ready.
Well, if you have a bad heuristic, that's a lot of moves that you have to sift through. At that point, you are basically just using depth first search. And depth first search is not something that we generally want to use at all, because there are a lot of situations where it will do absolutely nothing. And it will just hang on an infinite loop as it runs through tens of thousands up to millions of data points, trying in vain to find something.
Level up. Get ready.
There. And for example, I could foresee an algorithm being really, or just like making an AI to solve this kind of game. It could be really easy.
Level up.
Honestly, the hardest part would be generating the board in the first place, because I don't know what algorithm PopCap uses to do it. But all you would really do is just for each piece on the board, find all of its neighbors, or all empty spaces and all the empty spaces neighbors until you find some neighbor that's adjacent to those blobs of emptiness. And then just loop through until you find a set of moves. And then just keep making those moves until you win. It wouldn't be very efficient, but I think it would be guaranteed to solve any puzzle that you give it. Until it runs out of moves, of course.
Level up.
But this game has a method in place for when that happens, so it could just solve any problem. There you go.
Level up. Get ready.
I kind of lost my train of thought. I was talking about A-star, but I lost my place a little bit, and I kind of forget where it goes from here. Because to be real, I'm like tracing a path through the AI class that I took, and the midpoint of the class is a bit fuzzy because it's when my other classes started escalating pretty high.
Level up. Get ready.
Right, that was the next one, planning. So now we have this handy-dandy little algorithm that, provided that we give it the right number, can solve a lot of things. So let's try applying it to some real-world situations. Suppose that you have a robot arm, and you want this robot arm to do basically what you'd expect a robot arm to do. You just like have a pallet on the left, a pallet on the right. It takes in some information about those two pallets, maybe like their weight, their contents, and if there is contents in the left pallet, the robot arm reaches in, grabs the items if they're small enough, and then puts them over in the other pallet. This is where another problem starts to creep in, a problem that wasn't really addressed before because it wasn't very relevant. But I was saying before that AI operates in a closed world, and I was mainly saying that as a simplification, because a lot of the time, it does not. For instance, in the knowledge base, and in the method that lets us make inferences using that knowledge, we were always assuming that if something wasn't proven, it was false. But what if that wasn't true? How do we deal with things that are unquantifiable? Things that you cannot prove, but may or may not be true anyway, and have the potential to cause very large changes to your system?
Level up. Get ready.
Well, there's actually a programming language that's designed to handle that. It doesn't handle it perfectly, but it's very cool. It's a programming language called PDDL. And it's used a lot in actual robotics to solve these sort of conundrums. And at its core, it uses an A-star algorithm. I don't remember what heuristic it uses off the top of my head, but I think it's something like the number of... It has some clear condition.
Get ready.
And the way that the A-star algorithm works is, okay, at each step, how close are we to solving this larger problem? How many of the clear conditions have we finished? And then it sorts, and effectively, if it finds something that clears a condition, it will hyperfixate on that set of solutions until it's either proven that nothing can be done with those solutions, or it does it again and keeps traveling along that path until it finds its answer. It's really cool. It also kind of sucks, unfortunately, because it cannot do anything with numbers.
Level up. Get ready.
And implementing any sort of system to work with numbers in that programming language would be a massive hassle and not worth your time. There is another programming language called HTN that does a similar thing and can handle numbers, and I think that's also used quite commonly. But you end up in a lot of weird situations where you have to do things to work around dealing with numbers. Like, for instance, if there are 3 objects, and you want to only do a thing if there are exactly two of those objects. Well, you can't count to 2 unless you do some crazy nonsense, like representing everything in binary or something. Because at its core, binary is just true or false statements, so you could work with that. It would be insane, but you could work with that. You could also just do something like, with like all possible states that are correct. Because if there's only 3 things and you need 2 of them to be right, exactly 2 of them, no more, no less, you just do if 1 or 3 and not 2, or if 1 and 2 but not 3, or if 2 and 3 but not 1, something like that. So that's not an issue. It's weird, but it's not an issue. And now we move on to something else that can be incredibly useful if used properly. Bayes nets. Now, unfortunately, I'm going to have to talk about math. Specifically probability, which is arguably even worse. I was never a fan of probability, but I mean, I like numbers. I like statistics. I don't like the painstaking effort that you have to go through to find those numbers, but I like the numbers. Now, Bayes nets operate on something called Bayes rule, which is really, really, really useful in higher levels of probability for finding certain joint probabilities. So basically, if you have something given that something else is true, if you have A given that B is true, you can use Bayes' rule to find out, well, what is B given that A is true? You can flip it. And by chaining together multiple instances of that, you can figure out a lot of things, really. Bayes' rule is really powerful.
Level up. Get ready.
Now granted, it is really complicated, and my least favorite homework that I did, because there was so much weird math that I had to do for it. And if I figured out the algorithm, it would have been really easy, but I didn't. So it was very tricky. But from there, we move into something else that is, you wouldn't think it at first based on the name, but it is even more helpful than Bayes. There's something called a naive Bayes network. Now, by the name naive, you might think, oh, it's naive as in it's less smart, right? Well, yes and no. A naive Bayes network is basically a Bayes network assuming that everything... Pardon me. It's a Bayes network that assumes that everything is independent of each other. And it makes at the cost of some loss of specificity, it is much more powerful because you can make a lot more assumptions. Like, a lot more assumptions. And assumptions are the name of the game when it comes to a lot of AI, so that can be extremely, extremely helpful. Something that comes to mind is ChatGPT. And not just that, but also just like things like language classifiers and Siri, and this is the kind of AI that is incredibly helpful in the real world. Because sometimes an educated guess is good enough. I say sometimes because there's a lot of ethical issues with ChatGPT, there's a lot of ethical issues with a lot of these sort of systems, because that breadth of knowledge doesn't come from nowhere. It makes assumptions, but it still is based on something. And for a lot of these systems, it's based on specific sets of data. Now, the trouble is that data, not only can it be inherently biased because of where it ended up coming from, but it can also just be wrong, is the thing. That you could feed it all the data in the world and give it the best possible way of analyzing that data, and it'll still come up wrong. I'd say it's human nature, but that is not a human. So... it's useful, but you have to be careful with it.
Level up. Get ready.
And I think that brings me to the end of my spiel. This turned into a computer science lecture, but honestly, I'm happy with it. I guess the other thing that comes to mind is just like ethical concerns when it comes to that is ChatGPT as well. I've never personally been a fan of ChatGPT. I know how powerful it is, but it has some pretty pressing issues. Oh, right. Like, for example, where is all that data coming from? What if it makes the wrong decision? What if it makes a decision that's impacts a whole bunch of people and then it turns out to be wrong, or what if it makes a decision that's inherently biased or racist, things like that. The trouble with a lot of those problems is I'm in a very lucky situation to be able to do this. I don't mean YouTube, of course, anyone can start a YouTube channel, but I'm in a very lucky position to have learned things about AI. Because a lot of people do not have that liberty. And like I said, they have to rely on sources that may or may not be telling them the whole story.
Level up, get ready.
Whether it's out of accidental ignorance or trying to lead them on into thinking that the thing that they've been developing is way cooler than it actually is. And that can be really damaging. Because then it leads to a generation of people who have no idea how this new technology works. So when there are problems that come up based around that new technology, there's no answers for it. Because, oh, I don't know how it works. Who knows how it works? Oh, the developers of ChatGPT know. But do they? Because the other issue is that so much of that information is under the hood. There you go.
Level up, get
And there's no guarantee that it's designed to be read by humans, and most of the time it isn't. There's no guarantee that you can just air quotes, crack into the database of ChatGPT and get all of their data and understand what the hell it means. It's all gonna be encoded in numbers and symbols and whatever other weird nonsense the algorithm uses to understand it. So ironically enough, we're back to that issue of plausible deniability. We're back to the issue that there's a lot of questions that we just do not know the answer to. We're not much more powerful than the AI. We can make educated guesses, but we're not going to be that good at it. Fortunately, neither are our little robotic friends, so it's not like either of us are winning that competition. Oh, I actually forgot about a very cool one. Min-max as well. If you've ever seen a chess playing algorithm, you probably heard of min-max. And somehow I completely blanked talking about it, even though it's one of the coolest ones to just look at casually. To give a brief summary of min-max, it's like an A-star search algorithm, but as well as checking your moves, it also checks your opponent's moves. It doesn't just do the thing that is best for you, it does the thing that is also worst for your opponent. Another thing that it's really, really good at, of course, is looking ahead. Because if it just looked at, it looks at your next move, and then it looks at its opponent's next move, that'd be pretty powerful. But because it's operating under the assumption that both players are playing to win and as optimally as they possibly can, they can start making some assumptions. Which means that it gets way more powerful again. Assuming that both players are playing exclusively to win and are playing as well as they possibly can, the AI can continue to predict the next best move and the next worst move for your opponent.
Level up, get ready.
And continue in that pattern over and over and over again until it reaches the end of the game, or at least some arbitrary number of moves in. There are some algorithms, especially when it comes to more simple games like checkers, that can be programmed to basically beat an opponent before the match even starts. And that's what is known as a solved game. Chess is not a solved game, but there are some games that are. Like Connect 4, for instance. Connect 4 is solved, Tic-Tac-Toe is solved, because right from the get-go, if you're moving first, you are guaranteed to win or at least tie. if you follow a specific set of inputs and a specific set of things based on what you do, what your opponent does, you will always at least break even. And computers are really, really good at that. Deep Blue, I believe, the famous chess-playing computer, and one of the first big things to bring intrigue about what AI was capable of, I believe it was a min-max algorithm. And it was doing exactly that. Now, there are more complex and weirder algorithms that you can use besides Minimax, but Minimax is the best, is probably the most standard.
Get ready.
But again, I say these things just because I know I'm in a position where I could educate people. And the education's important. So, I mean, why not, right?
Level up. Get ready.
Also, I may as well say, I may as well say, I may as well say, strategy mode for this game is really uninteresting. It's just this, but it has gravity and new tiles coming from the top, and when you run out of moves, you lose. Or when you run out of moves, the water will start to rise, and when the water reaches the top, like before, you lose. It's interesting, but it is also very easy, and it's not really interesting enough for me to show.
Get ready.
Plus, my voice is starting to get hoarse, and I don't want to lose my voice, so... After this, I'll go drink some tea or something. Also, I didn't even address this until now because I was too busy giving my freaking computer science lecture, but there are insane aquarium fish on the sides.
Get ready.
I always thought that was really cute. Oh, there we go. Ah, no wonder I was so confused about the moves that I had to make. Also, I'm really sorry that my S's are so sharp. It's an accent thing, not much I can really do about it. But it doesn't help. Not only is it an accent thing, but it's also because I did chorus for quite a long time, basically since... I'd say elementary school, but in elementary school, you don't really intend to do things. You kind of just do what your parents tell you to do. But even back then, I liked it. But I've been doing chorus as long as I can remember, and it's led to me being very particular with the way that I enunciate my vowels. It's kind of just a side effect of that. But hey, At least that means that even if the audio is super scuffed and it's really quiet, like it tends to be sometimes, it's still sort of easy to understand what I'm saying. I hope.
Get ready.
I think my hard limit is going to be level 50. If I make it to level 50, I'm just going to let God take me, and that'll be the end of this video. And if I die before that point, well, I will accept it. Because I've kind of said everything I want to say at this point.
Level get ready. Level up, get ready.
It's kind of funny to think, I have never actually read the Bible. I probably should at some point, because, like, regardless of my opinion on Christianity or religion, it is still the most influential work in the history of literature. So I feel like I owe it to I owe it to the literary canon to at least read through it. I don't have to agree with what's in it, but I probably should read it at least. Uh-oh. I can see that water rising out of the corner of my eye. It is getting very fast. Okay, I'm fine with just letting it rise.
Level up, get ready. Level up, get ready.
Uh-oh. This might be my death knell. Oh no, 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 no. No, 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 no. No! Alright, level 46. I'm fine with that.
Over.
That is a clean third place. And no, before you ask, my name isn't Tom. I had thought of a random name, and that seemed to work pretty well. But hey, I mean, that's all I got. This was very fun. Yeah, so puzzle, I may as well cover these very, very quickly. Strategy,
Get ready.
simple enough. It's just regular mode, but with gravity. You can take as much time as you want, but every time you run out of moves, the water will rise. And puzzle mode is... well... why does this look familiar? It is just Bejeweled. It's Bejeweled without power gems or most of the other things that make people like Bejeweled. So it's kind of just mid. But whatever. I guess that's all I got, though. Thanks for watching.